All right, well, it is my pleasure to introduce August Brunsman, the Executive Director of the Secular Student Alliance. I've been very privileged to be able to work pretty closely with August for the last 2.5 years. For a long time, the Secular Student Alliance was the two of us working at our two desks. Since then, we've grown a lot, and I've been able to really see what a fantastic gift the Secular Student Alliance has in August. He's is good-natured and always positive, has fantastic ideas, but is always happy to listen to the ideas of others, and he always has time to listen and answer questions. So I encourage you to do that as part of this talk, to keep your questions and send them over, because you won't get someone to answer them better than August.
Thank you, Liz. Well, thank you very much for that flattering introduction, Liz. How many of you got to see JT's talk yesterday? Right. How many of you thought it was a really amazing talk? Good. Me too. And I have the incredible pleasure of getting to work with people like Liz, people like JT, people like Nick and Andy and Jesse, who are not here, who are, clearly through the results I think we're seeing of just such tremendous growth, both in campus groups and in high school groups throughout the country, throughout the world. We're doing incredible things. And I have been with the Secular Student Alliance since 2000 when we founded it. It was a group of 8 idealistic college students or recent graduates who wanted to make a place for secular groups across the country, and eventually we got to the world. And we went from a bunch of those students to an organization that has 7 employees and is doing all these incredible things, getting coverage in the New York Times and the Chronicle of Higher Education. And the thing that I feel like, at least a little bit, that I feel like I contributed to that, because frankly I'm staggered at the capacity of Liz, of JT, of Jesse, of Andy and Nick. And the thing I feel that I added was being crazy enough or foolish enough or idealistic enough to ask for money. I think doing that really changed the character of how we were able to work with the rest of the world. And I hope that today I will be able to share a little bit of that process and my journey to be able to do that with the rest of you. So let's talk about our goals. I've given several fundraising trainings, and I was actually at another fundraising training earlier this week, and it lasted for 3 hours, and we just barely touched the surface. We were doing lists of things we were putting in the parking lot. When somebody would mention, oh, how do you do matches? Oh, what about people that haven't given to you in a while? All these things. We put them on this list to the side of the room. We call that the parking lot. And at the end of our 3 hours, we had covered a ton of territory, but there were still lots of ideas in that parking lot. There's so much to talk about fundraising that it is difficult to get it all in, and we're not going to, and hopefully we'll have a little time for Q&A so we can get to some maybe specific questions that you guys have. But in the fundraising trainings I've done, usually, like this one, they're 20 minutes long. And my goal, Daryl Ray talked about how important it is to have goals so you know what you're doing. My goal as a presenter had been to teach each person in my fundraising training how to ask for money for a secular organization. But then, as I was thinking about preparing for this presentation here in Boston, I had a realization that I've sort of known intuitively for a long time, but I think has made me change my goal. And that's that excellence requires others. And that it is not possible to do amazing things, or at least excellence for me requires others. Sometimes I say that the way I lead is that I pick something that I think needs to be done, and I go and start doing it in front of other people. And the other people are like, ugh, stop, you're doing that so horribly. Let me go in and do that for you. So that's the way I lead, and it's worked for me. It might not work for you, but and there are people that can do excellent things who are on their own, who are not me. But for most of us, for me at least, for most mere mortals, I think that excellence requires others. So I thought about the goal, and I thought, you know what? This is not my goal. This is our goal. We're going to own this together. So our goal for today, if you're willing to buy in, and I really hope you are, is to get each one of us, to get someone else who's not in this room to ask for money for a secular organization this year. Now, there's a lot of changes there, and I'm going to go through the changes, and we're going to kind of talk about why I changed several of the things. So the first thing is that I changed, I put in this element of teaching others. So I'm going to get you guys to go out and teach others. Now, why am I doing that? There are a couple of reasons as to why I want you guys, and here we can go back to the goal, because you all got the Terry quote. Okay, which, anyway. I promise not to set any of you on fire unless you ask me to. At least not literally. I want to get you to get someone else, so you're going to need to teach them to fundraise, who's not here. And the reason I want you to do that is because when you have to teach a skill, it forces you to slow down and think about what it is you are doing. And it gets you to be better at that skill. The other part of why I want you to get somebody else to do it, to teach them to do it, and maybe I should have said to get each one of us to ask someone else for money successfully. But actually I don't care so much about that as much as just the act of asking, is that when you're trying to get somebody else to do something, it helps to have credibility. It helps to have gone and done that thing before. To actually be able to say, well, yeah, I've had dinner with a donor, and I've sat across the table, and I've said, would you be willing to consider a pledge of $100,000 to the Secular Student Alliance this year? I have actually said that. Nobody has. Well, actually, I guess somebody did say yes. We're running a $100,000 matching offer. Wow. Okay. But mostly I get no's when I ask with that number. But I've asked with many other numbers and been successful. And I think that brings some credibility to what I'm telling you. So when you go out and you talk with other people and you say, hey, what the secular movement needs, among other things, but one of the things that the secular movement needs is more money. You saw Daryl, well, most of you saw Daryl Ray's presentation, and one of the things he pointed out is that Campus Crusade for Christ's budget, I think in 2008, was just shy of $500 million. The Secular Student Alliance's budget is, well, actually, it's kind of amazing. The budget that we have just passed for the coming fiscal year is just shy of $500,000, which is getting somewhere, and getting somewhere we've never been before. But it's obviously 1,000 times smaller. We have a huge amount of distance to cover, so it's really important to engage in this task. And when you go and tell people that you want to have them engage in the task of asking other people for money to support a secular organization, I think that's really important. You want to be able to say, yeah, I've done it. So before you can go and get somebody else to do it, you've got to go and do it yourself. And then the other thing that is new in this goal is that I didn't just say that you're going to teach somebody to go out and ask for money for a secular organization this year, but that I also said that the goal is to have you guys get somebody to go out and ask for money for a secular organization this year. And here's the thing. Teaching fundraising has essentially one part: telling people how to go out and ask for money. Getting people to go out and fundraise has two parts: telling them to go out and how to ask for the money, how to do it, what are good ways, what are good approaches, what sort of information are donors going to want to know, or foundations, or whoever it is you're appealing to. The harder part, I think, in getting people to go out and to fundraise is convincing people to actually take the plunge and do it, and to go and ask for the money. So that's the tricky bit, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time this morning focusing entirely on how you, I hope, can convince yourself, and how I can convince you that this is really important and that we really need to go out and fundraise for the secular movement, or for whatever causes we feel are important, but the secular movement is why we're here together today. So here is the crux of my whole argument behind this, and I hope this is helpful when you talk to other people. But if it's worth your time, it's worth other people's money. This is a cause that for most of us, when we got started especially, nobody was paying us to do. And even though I'm getting paid now, Liz is getting paid now for SSA work, we both still do volunteer humanist and atheist stuff outside. Liz and I are both on the board of the Humanist Community of Central Ohio. I volunteer for Camp Quest. And I know that all of you spend your time that nobody else is paying you for to go out and work for your cause. This is the notion of spreading Enlightenment values to make our society better is something that all of us have passion about. And if we really have passion about it and we're really excited about actually going out and doing it, then we owe it to ourselves to be proud enough and excited enough and analytical enough about what it is we're trying to do to go out and focus what we're doing well enough so that we think, that we really believe that it is worth other people's money. So, money is really important. It does a lot of things. There is no way that Liz Liddell and JT Eberhard and Jesse Galiff and Andy Cheadle and Ashley Paramore and Nick Stancato could spend as much time as they do helping the secular student movement if they had to hold down day jobs in addition to doing what they do to SSA. There's absolutely no way. The full-timers in the office are putting in at least 40 hours a week, frequently much more. And if they had to make money, there's no way it could happen. So you know. And in addition to staff, there are all sorts of good things that you can use money to get. You can bring in speakers, you can travel to conferences, you can print t-shirts, you can put up very controversial billboards, you can buy this tasty fish to feed to people so that they come to your meeting. But I submit to you that fundraising is worth doing even if you don't get the money. And here's why. Even if you never, or if you get the money but you don't even get on any of those things. So here are a few reasons why I think it's worth it. One is that when you are going to put yourself in this very uncomfortable situation, it starts off being uncomfortable, I assure you. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that fundraising is always fun all of the time, and it feels great to ask a stranger to give you money, especially when you're thinking in the context of random people calling you up on the phone while you're eating dinner and asking you for money and how great that makes you feel. Asking people to support the passion that you have and that you think they have too, brings a level of critical thinking to your planning and your work, a level of specificity that you are probably not going to have unless you're going out on a limb and asking other people to support it. So that specificity and that creativity is very important. You can think of it as the necessity that will lead to your invention of talking about what it is particularly you want to accomplish. And in thinking about particularly what you want to accomplish, when you go off and you say, would you be willing to consider a pledge of $5,000 to the Secular Student Alliance this year, that creates accountability. You now have asked someone to support what it is you're going to do, and you need to explain to them a year later, 6 months later, whatever it is, did anything happen? Did the money get spent? Did it get spent on booze and crack? Did it get spent on promoting Enlightenment ideals? Did it get spent on making high schoolers feel more comfortable when they are non-religious and in a religious environment? So it creates that accountability. And that accountability is key because it's sort of easy to let us waste our own time. But once we're bringing other people into the mix, it raises the bar. And it makes us much more careful about how it is we go about proceeding in our activities. It makes us better at planning. And it makes us actually take the time to plan. Relationships. So this applies in a lot of different ways. But it turns out that relationships are important for a lot of reasons beyond just getting money from an institution or a human being. And I think the way this is especially important is in the terms of not getting money from people that are totally on board with your passion, but getting funds from organizations or individuals, although I think it's usually in organizations, that don't completely agree with everything you're going to do. And the context that this is most applicable to that I can think of right now, although there are ways to do it off campus, is on campus there are university fund boards, or funding boards, or whatever they're called, or activities councils, or what have you. And they give out funds in order to enrich campus life. And they are excited to have authors come in, like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, not because they're excited about promoting atheism, but because they're interesting thinkers of our time. And when you go to them and you say, hey, we're the atheist group, we're part of the diversity on campus, we're important, and they read your application, even if they turn it down, they know you exist, which is really valuable. But if they don't turn it down, and they do fund it, they're like, hey, that organization is part of the campus. Oh yeah, we know about the atheists. They applied for funds. They brought in that speaker. A whole bunch of people came. It was really exciting. That's exactly what we want to have happening on our campus. So it builds up your credibility and your relationships with people and institutions, which, by the way, all institutions, everyone I found anyway, actually made up of people. And if those people had negative or shallow stereotypes about atheists before, maybe you're going to improve that a bit by interacting with them in a professional way, by coming to them with a budget and a plan and all this good stuff to work through getting funding from whatever organization it is. Related to this, I think, is institutional sophistication. And by this, I mean that you become kind of a player on your campus, and you are able to gain the involvement of people who maybe otherwise would not be that concerned about your group. Maybe they would, perhaps they're an atheist, but it's not really something that's important to them. But if it's a young business major or a young nonprofit management major, and they see, oh wow, the atheist group has a $20,000 budget on campus. That's kind of exciting and interesting. Those must be some pretty serious people who are running that group. They're going to see that, and they're going to want to join your group just because you're doing something excellent, or maybe the fact that they're doing something that you are doing something excellent kicks them over into actually getting involved in your group, whereas before maybe they would have gone off and just joined the American Marketing Association club or something like that was more in line with their professional goals. The last thing is clout, frankly. Money is sort of this matters juice that gets sprayed onto things, and even if they don't have, or paint. How about paint? This matters paint. Is that better than juice? Okay, right, all right. It is. It's highlighter. It lets people know, well, it's not that it lets them know, it's that it tells them, whether or not it's true, that whatever is getting funded is what matters. And the fact that your organization is getting funded lets people know, even if they aren't necessarily very excited about what your group is doing beforehand, that, there was a lot of money that got spent in putting together this lecture, or putting together this conference, or putting together that service drive. That must be something worth paying attention to. So those are all sorts of things that even if you don't actually spend the money on anything, or you're able to do amazing things for free, that you want to go and fundraise. So the last thing I want to leave you with is a story. It's actually about a fellow Buckeye, which is, do people know that Buckeyes are people that graduated from the Ohio State University? Okay, cool. Good. Anyway, his name was Ira Glasser. Not to be confused with Ira Glass, who's also a fantastic guy, but Ira Glasser, who was the executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union from 1978 to 2001. When Ira came in, the ACLU had a budget of about $4.5 million a year. When he left, it had a budget of over $45 million a year and had offices with paid staff in every single state in the nation, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia. It had offices in a few big cities when he came. He played a central role in transforming that organization. And he did it in a zillion different ways. I only know of, in particular, one way that he did it because a friend of mine was there when it happened. So Ira Glasser is sitting in his office reading the New York Times, which he considered to be the conduit of everything important and all wisdom. There's no better source of information. He's reading the New York Times, and he reads about this guy, this businessman named Saul Polyak. And Saul was this rich guy, and the story was about Saul had given $3 million to the Columbia Journalism School to study the First Amendment. And Saul was like, wow, that's interesting. I wonder if, or Ira was like, oh, that's interesting that Saul did that. Maybe I should call my development department and see what Saul's given to us. Maybe he's already giving us a lot of money. I don't recognize his name, but maybe we could cultivate him. So he calls the development department, and they answer, and he asks, do you know Saul Polyak? And they had a mainframe back then, and it took a little while. They couldn't just type in his name. I think maybe they had to program a punch card or something. I have no idea. I'm completely making that up. And so they call him back a few minutes later, and there's no, we've never heard of him. He's like, wow, that's weird. And he calls his membership department, which is different. That's the membership department is just the people that give $20 a year, because they get a little flyer in the mail. And he calls up. He's like, maybe Saul's on that. Who knows? I gotta check. So he calls, and sure enough, Saul is in the database. Saul is given $100 a year for the last 15 years. And sure enough, the little card that he gets in the mail is $20, $30, $50, $100. That's the card that the ACLU sends out. So anyway, Ira, calls up Saul, gets his phone number from the membership department, and says, hey, I'm Ira Glasser, and I'd really like to come and meet with you. And Saul is amazed, because Ira, it turns out, is his hero. And he's just staggered that this amazing guy is calling him, and Ira says, hey, can I come down and talk with you? And Saul says, yes, absolutely, come this afternoon or whenever you're free, and it's that afternoon. So Saul and the friend of mine, Woody, who told me this story and came along, walk the 6 blocks over to Saul's office. They're both in Manhattan, and go up and meet with him. And they're talking. And they're sharing. They have a whole lot in common. Very excited about. They obviously have a shared passion for civil liberties, and they have a lot of other similarities too. It turns out. And eventually, Saul gets around to asking, Ira gets around to asking Saul, why did you give them $3 million to study the First Amendment, and us $100 to defend the First Amendment? Does anybody know what Saul said? You never asked. Right. So, and in fact, when they had asked, because they sort of kind of had with that little card, Saul was like, I check $100. I'm going to give you the maximum amount it says on this card. So the lesson there is to go and do it, to go and ask. And that's the most important part. And I would love to talk with people at lunch and later. Actually, we've got a few minutes now if people do have questions. But that's the most important thing. There are all sorts of amazing resources, and you can go to youtube.com/secular students, and another version of this talk I give, which has more advice about how to do fundraising, is there. But definitely happy to help and to give you any ideas you have. Does anybody have any experiences or questions? Or yeah.
I was wondering, besides just asking for donations or asking for money from your school, what are some other events or fundraisers that student groups can do that you've seen work out positively in the past?
Sure. So I actually, let me see if I can pull it up really fast here. I have a matrix that I made, which is online, but you guys get to see it here. I don't know how well you can see it. All right, but so this is the campus fundraising matrix, and it has on the bottom startup cost, and on the side return on investment. And we won't go into that. We can talk about it later. But here are a whole bunch of different places that student groups have successfully gotten money before. Yes.
I want to pitch in a couple things that aren't showing up on the matrix that may speak to the question.
Okay.
The Richard Dawkins Foundation Out Camping Store is willing to work with student groups to sell merchandise at cost so that you can then resell as a fundraiser, which is really awesome, particularly if you're bringing in a speaker like Andy Thompson, or if you're going to have Liz Cornwell in your area, or Richard in your area. But aside from specific event-related fundraisers like that, event-type fundraisers like bake sales and things like that, the only time I've seen them be successful is when you're telling people that the funding is going to a charity. So when you're raising funds to donate to tsunami relief or to the Haiti earthquake relief, you're doing event fundraisers for your group, in our track experience, has generally been a waste of time.
Yeah.
Focus on this.
Yeah. Sharon, did you have a... Are you answering?
I have an exception to Liz's rule.
Okay.
Which I've seen work is if you do an event like that and you split the pot between a charity and your.
Ah, all right. You are an obvious source of funding, so don't forget that. Maybe not a lot, but that can actually, your money can lead to more money. Donors really like matching funds. I think membership fees are actually a really good idea. They can be optional. They can be $5, not necessarily because they're going to get you an insane amount of money, but because they are going to get buy-in from your members. I think that it's perfectly acceptable if you can work through the red tape in your university to do it, to charge for events. Several speakers are big enough that that they can get something at the door, although that doesn't always work. There are national organizations. The Secular Student Alliance and Center for Inquiry on Campus both have grant funds. Definitely encourage applying to those. Your alumni are a fantastic resource, and even though your group may be only 2 years old at this point, I highly recommend having a system for keeping track of them, and hopefully we're going to be able to start helping with that in the next year. We'll see. But I think your alumni are really important. I think having a relationship with the off-campus group is something that is a missed opportunity. Like Daryl was saying, money left on the table over and over again that I see happening. Go to those off-campus groups, get to know them. I all but guarantee you that if you ask them to buy pizza for a meeting, that they will. And if you have bigger aspirations, they will probably help out with those too, or they will do their best to help out with those as well. You can do a lot of other things too, but I think that departments and activity funds really, really need to be utilized. And I know your group from Pittsburgh, you went to your activities fund or whatever it was, and you got money to fly here to Boston to this conference, which I think is fantastic. Hats off. That's just really good work. And I hope that, did anybody else get funding from their university to come here? No? Oh, yeah, a little? Okay, good. Partly counts. Bravo. That's very good. So I'm glad you're working that system. I think that connect with departments and try to find synergies with other groups. Those can be groups that are really aligned with you, like say Fusion or whatever your GLBT group is called, or probably more than one now on your campus. Join events with them, or groups that you don't necessarily think that you would be aligned with, like say Campus Crusade for Christ. They might want to do a debate with you, or InterVarsity, or whoever. Not every Christian group is excited about debates, but some are. And frequently what you can have happen is that they're in charge of bringing the money for Dinesh D'Souza or whoever, and you're in charge of bringing the money for Daniel Dennett or Dan Barker or whoever it is. So I think those are all good strategies.
So we've been trying to do fundraising for a charity that we're going to run with Relay for Life, which is
great for cancer, right?
And we're like, okay, it's going to be great. We want to do fundraising for a long time. It's always like a lot of groups don't really want to work with us with this. It doesn't matter. We're like all gung-ho. So we try to do fundraising now, and it kind of falls flat on its feet. A lot of kids can't ask their parents because their parents aren't really it's cancer, but they say, oh, it's for the humanists, and they're not really supportive of humanists.
Hey, okay.
And then we've tried asking just off-campus groups, and the response has been fairly lackluster. Even if I thought it would work well, being like we're putting our name out there saying atheists can fundraise and it's going to be great. And I don't know, what do you suggest?
So one thing. So have all of your members gone to their parents and asked and been told no, or are they too chicken to go and ask?
I said you should ask your parents. Not that big of a deal. Just a little email, but who knows if they have? I don't have any way of seeing if they have.
Right. So, and I don't mean to call them chicken. That's not fair or nice. But because I know some people would get kicked out of their house, and I'm completely sympathetic, and I had an easy time. I think that what they do need to do, though, is that they need to go and ask. And I think that if you're raising money for cancer, that you can go and even set up a table and ask for people to sponsor you there, or talk to people in your classes and say, hey, I'm going to be doing the Relay for Life, for my humanist group. Would you be willing to help? And it does two great things. One, it gets people talking about it, and two, it gets people talking about it in a positive way. So I think those would be effective strategies. I wonder if you have an idea.
Actually, I came across this the other day. It's a brilliant strategy. I've been trying to figure out how to use this. And I forget where it was, but the campus had Ann Coulter coming to talk. And so what they did is the LGBT group or whatever had started a pledge so that you could pledge X number of dollars for every minute she speaks. So basically, everyone, they get all these donations from all these people. They'll say, okay, well, I'll give you $5 for every minute she's up there, or whatever the case may be. So then she gets up there and speaks. Well, the longer she speaks, the more money that they raise for the LGBT group. So it encourages her to shut the hell up. So it was kind of one of those. It struck me as very, very clever, and it actually kind of serves two goals. One is you're fundraising for your group, but you're also kind of making it painful for them to come and we hate the gays, we hate the atheists, it's all their fault. Because now, the longer they talk about this, the more money they get from their supporters to continue.
I think it's a brilliant idea. If you can do that, give it a shot.
I credit for it, but I just came across it.
Well, thank you for sharing that idea. Sharing brilliant ideas is at least as important as having brilliant ideas, I think. I do think that the key element there, and I know there's a pizza party to go to, but I think that the key element there, though, is getting your members and you being an example for being in a place where you're asking for money for the Relay for Life, for the humanist group, without any shame. And I think it's really easy and common, I see it a lot, for people in the humanist and atheist movement to kind of have this reticence about talking about what it is they do because they're worried about making people feel uncomfortable. And we all want to make the people that we interact with happy most of the time. I think it's kind of our default nature when interacting with others. I think that we sometimes bring the assumption that, if I ask for money that's being channeled through a humanist cause, that's going to upset people. And I think we just have to throw that out the window and ask joyfully and delightfully, like, hey, would you help me do this? I'm trying to do this. So that's my advice. I think that the advice to tie it, if you get Ann Coulter to come to your campus, clearly this is the way to do it. So I hope that helps.